Welcome to the workshop on No BS on Breaking into UX by Perry Wang, who is a designer at Discord and has experience in UI UX and visual design. Now on to Perry for his presentation.
Cool. All right. Hey, y'all. I'm Perry, and for the past few years, there have been a lot of people trying to break into UX, and I think it has a lot to do with like the impression that it's a fairly lucrative career and really interesting work. Super competitive pay and pretty good work-life balance. So I guess it's pretty straightforward why. Now, the problem that I've noticed is that there's just a lot of outright terrible advice that's given out by like these quote unquote thought leaders who either give out like extremely superficial tips that aren't really helpful or are just like super outdated from today's standards, or just flat out say like atrocious things for clicks and impressions. As a fairly like early career designer myself, it all kind of really annoys me, which is why I just want to be real with you guys and give you the no BS perspective on things I think you should actually focus on. Fair warning, like some of these things I'll be saying will probably be pretty hard pills to swallow, and at the end of the day, like it's gonna take a lot of hard work. So just hold on to your hats. Quick disclaimer so I don't get sued. Everything that I'll be sharing today is not affiliated with any of the companies that I've worked at in the past or I'm working at now. They're my views and mine exclusively. So really quickly going over what I've planned, I'm going to give you guys an overview of kind of my UX design career so far. So you guys can start thinking of like maybe questions you want to ask me later on during the panel or maybe after this presentation. Just to quickly go over the agenda also, I'm going to give and I'll kind of like go over a rough visualization of how the hiring process scene has changed from pre-pandemic to today and how I see it. And then afterwards, I'm going to just dive right into some of the most frequently asked questions that I get when people reach out to me for coffee chats, and then wrap that up with some key takeaways towards the end. So in 2018, I started architecture school at U of T because I was pretty into Minecraft and that was pretty much it. Pretty decent at math, so I felt like it made sense to try architecture. There I learned that I really just liked making stuff and found a lot of satisfaction in turning an idea into a physical thing. Come 2020, started to realize how rough the architecture industry actually is. Needed a master's, super long process of getting licensed, really long working hours, really low agencies to do like the actual design work, and a surprisingly low pay. All the time I had in the pandemic, I just said, screw it. Let me try something new. Ended up picking up a small graphic design gig on the side. While I was doing that, I kind of stumbled across this design competition, this new like hype thing that they were calling like UX design. So I ended up coming in last place, but I got super interested and invested in it. Started working through like whatever tutorials I could find online, kept entering more competitions and started just placing pretty high in them. And just like overall having a lot of fun and enjoying the learning process. So took a lot of these projects from the competitions, jammed them up into my first portfolio ever to apply for internships because that's what you're supposed to do back then, and was able to find a role over at RBC for the summer of like 2021. At RBC, really tried to get the most out of that summer, literally just asked tons of questions and was trying to coffee chat all the designers there. So after the internship, I hopped into my fourth year, which was my thesis year, and absolutely hated it because I knew I wasn't going to be an architect. Was ending up pulling a decent amount of all-nighters just to get through the courses, but also trying to improve my practical skills in UX. At the same time, I was working on a new portfolio to include the projects that I did at RBC, and then took one of my favorite design competition projects and then just kind of redid that completely from scratch. Towards the start of like 2022, I began applying to a bunch of full-time roles, probably sent out like 80, and then was very fortunate to have landed an offer at Google. And like you think at that point, like I could finally like coast a little bit, but obviously the tech industry had other plans for me. About 6 months in, the product area that I was working in was cut entirely, and then the bulk of our team, including myself, was laid off a couple months later. So I did what any sane person would do and just kind of like dipped to Japan for a couple of weeks to go on my grad trip a year late. Eventually, the crippling anxiety of being unemployed and competing in a market full of laid off designers motivated me to kind of grind out another portfolio. And this time with the work that I did at Google, which you can find at my website at perryw.ca. Fortunately for me, one of the directors at Google really liked the work that I did and helped me start a conversation with the people over at Discord, which is where I am at now. So yeah, my career has been all over the place so far. Happy to answer any questions later in the panel or after this talk. But I think for now, let's just dive into a bit more of where I see the hiring scene looks like right now. So prior to 2022, during what I like to call the golden era for tech and UX, I saw a lot of people starting to break in, myself included. I'd say here, like, there was a pretty even split between unqualified and qualified candidates. Like, no hate to boot camps, but I'd say the majority of unqualified candidates came from boot camps without any prior design education. Like a few of them broke in, but not many, and usually they were the ones that already had like a little graphic design background or something. That said, I saw a lot of the grads coming from formal design training get hired because they were more prepared after 4 years of education versus just a few months. Tech companies were booming, and so naturally there was a really high appetite to hire junior candidates. And of course, like top talent obviously got picked up very, very quickly. Now, come late last year into this year, tech crashes. Somehow boot camps absolutely explode. Layoffs happen, so the top talent pool increases because now we have a bunch of like laid off designers who were now on the job market. That effectively bumps candidates that would have been qualified maybe a couple years ago into the unqualified pool. And now companies are being a lot more intentional about their hiring. So there's much less of an appetite to hire people, especially juniors that aren't considered top talent. And so what do I think that entails for the people trying to break in now? I think it means that they have to start pushing themselves to get into the top talent candidate pool. And I know that's a lot like easier said than done, but hopefully, in this next section of frequently asked questions, maybe that'll give you a better understanding of exactly what needs to be done. So question one is I get often asked a lot is how do I stand out as an early career designer, especially in this job market? I always start by answering that question by just saying like blatantly that there's no hidden trick or like secret formula. Like it genuinely boils down to the quality of your work and your ability to showcase your skills, like primarily through your portfolio and more specifically the projects that you put inside of it. Um, like a reality design, in my opinion, is a craft industry, meaning the better you are at your craft, the more likely companies will want to hire you. So that means you just got to get really, really, really good at making stuff. Now, in terms of like the idea of like standing out, I think it should be attributed to more of a mindset shift. Like a lot of people have this misconception that like UX is easy and kind of just approach it like here, let me snap together a quick portfolio website in a couple weeks. Let me post around on LinkedIn, try to get myself to stand out, and all of a sudden I'm job ready. What I think that leads to is like your typical run of the mill, half baked portfolio that includes like lackluster Spotify redesigns, arbitrary user personas, like and screenshots of like sticky notes and like Figma canvases. Like these are the things I tend to see a lot in bootcamp portfolios. And genuinely, in my opinion, like standing out has a lot more to do with hard work rather than raw talent. This is why I believe like 4 years of rigorous formal design training will always outshine 3, 6, 9 months at whatever bootcamp. So question two, portfolios. What makes a portfolio strong and stand out? Strong portfolio, in my opinion, is able to demonstrate your expertise in the design craft and your ability to actually apply critical thinking to interesting problem spaces. A friend of mine said this nicely, but basically in a portfolio, the content is king. Like there are no gimmicks like putting an emoji next to your landing page or saying you love being at the intersection of like art and technology or whatever it is nowadays. Um, Focus on your projects and within those projects, aim to tell a story. Like don't go through a checklist or like a fixed process because that's at the end of the day really, really boring to read. And it's not how problems are actually solved on the job. Like how I like to frame it is like, how would I talk about this project to someone at a social gathering or like a party? Like, how do I make it engaging? Like, and not turn it into some super boring long essay. I'll dive more into case studies in the next question, but I think for now it's just important to call out that your portfolio is also a user experience in and of itself. So you don't want to be claiming that you're a UX designer, but you're not willing to put in the effort of making your portfolio a pleasant experience for people that are visiting it. Question three, how do I make compelling case studies that aren't quote unquote cookie cutter? Basically, do everything in the previous question and focus especially on the storytelling aspect of your projects and the overall presentation. As a designer, you need to be able to kind of communicate by showing and not by writing. Take the time to present and your project's story very visually, whether it's through a diagram, high quality prototypes and mockups versus writing out 5 paragraphs of text that in reality, I assure you that no one will ever read. And that goes hand in hand with being very intentional with the content that you put inside your case studies. Like don't just throw everything you made in there just to show how much work you did. Like user personas are like a perfect example of this. Like so many times I see people put useless information about like a target user that they never really call back on later in the design solutions. Like for example, what does your user David being 37 living in like Iowa have to do anything with your checkout flow and how that behaves and then why it does the things it does? Like it's just fluff, and it, in my opinion, doesn't feel like you're thinking for yourself or thinking critically about solving a problem. Another point to add here is that in my opinion, no amount of process work really matters if your final designs just don't look great. Like this is why I try to push people to show me like the good stuff first, and then have that be a motivating piece for me to read the rest of your project. Now that being said, remember that the quality will always be better than quantity. Take the time to polish out that diagram, take out that screenshot of that fig jam, and invest time in artifacts that people will actually enjoy looking at. And if you're able to kind of commit all that effort into, I would say 2 to 3 projects, honestly, maybe even one really, really strong project, and I think your portfolio will be in a good spot, regardless of whether you have real projects that have launched or passion projects. Question 4, how important is networking and will it help me land a UX role? My short answer to that is probably not. Like especially when you're just starting out. In my opinion and history and experience going through all of it, no stranger is going to give you a referral, especially after like the first time you meet. So really just focus on getting your work to a really hireable standard first. That's not to say that like you shouldn't network at all, but in my opinion, only do so if you are genuinely interested in learning about someone or like a specific company or just for the sake of meeting new people. But at the end of the day, like getting a job when you're just starting out, especially in like a craft-based industry where you're kind of defined based on what you produce, it isn't about the people you know, but more about like how you position yourself to get hired. Question 5 is, do I need a mentor? Will a mentor help me find a job, and where do I find these mentors? In my opinion, like yes, mentors are awesome, but only if your work is already at a certain level or like a standard first. Like if you're looking to ask questions that you found that you could otherwise just like Google yourself, you probably don't need a mentor yet. Like there's a lot of fundamental things that you need to figure out on your own. That it's not like a mentor's job to teach you the basics, but generally, the better your work and your skills are, the more motivated that like actual professionals will be to want to be in a mentorship position for you. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, it's a mentor's job to really only nudge you in the right direction and help you navigate situations that are uniquely relevant to only you and your current position in your career situation. And in terms of like where to find mentors, like you could try resources like ADP List. In my experience, though, it's been the hit or miss. It's super hard to build a genuine relationship when things are so prescriptive and you're like scheduling time to meet. It's fine. I find it very, very weird. But it could be a very good resource for like one-off portfolio reviews if you just need like a professional to take a look at your work. But I think all in all, like finding a mentor at the end of the day needs to be organic and isn't really something that you should be forcing or trying to force as you're kind of just starting out and figuring out the ropes. Cool. Question 6. Is my resume to blame for me not being able to land a role? How do I get past this quote unquote ATS thing? In my honest opinion, usually your resume is not the problem. Like it's very likely that your portfolio is just lacking somewhere. Um, but that's not to say like the resume is completely useless. Like obviously, it's a standard job application document. But to me, your resume, from the perspective of like a design role, it is a test of your understanding in absolute pure design fundamentals. So like are you able to make a good looking print artifact or document by solely relying on typography, layout, and spacing? I think with just those three things, usually hiring managers can tell within quite literally a few seconds without even reading any of your resume if you are a capable designer or not. And the whole discussion about like ATS, in my opinion, is extremely overrated and over-indexed. Like if you're applying to any decent, like somewhat mature company, your resume will end up in front of a human. Because think about all the potential talent that a company might be losing on if they're relying solely on an automatic filtering system for a design-related role. And like half the time, if you notice when you're applying to jobs, you're entering your experiences twice, anyways, in application portals. And so that is just proof right there that like, the companies want a fair hiring opportunity for everyone. And they understand that resumes can take different formats. Like at the end of the day, all you need to make sure is like your text in your resume is selectable and that you're submitting like a PDF, not like an image. I made that mistake in the past, so don't do that. Question 7 is, what's the single most important skill for a early career designer to have? My answer to that is always going to be visual design, craft, and execution. So basically, like TLDR, can you design stuff that functions well and also looks good? As a junior, like I think it's important to understand that your sole responsibility is to follow instructions and execute well on them. And that means you need to be able to have mastered the fundamentals of design, like knowing principles of typography, contrast, alignment, layout, spacing, color, repetition, composition, like whatever you name it. Like try not to like memorize on the theories too much and over index and like treating it as like these flashcards of like things you need to like randomly pull up during your day-to-day work, but like just know you need to know how to apply them in your work and see how it applies to other examples of design work. Because like I think at the end of the day, like these things help you develop a good taste in design, which a lot of juniors, in my opinion, lack today. Like sure, like, you could agree that design is subjective, which I agree with also to some extent, but I think that design is only subjective after a objective threshold is met, and that usually is shown through some kind of consideration of those design principles that I just mentioned. Last question that I get asked a lot is, how exactly do you improve your visual design skills and develop a stronger taste for good design? I think that honestly starts with just surrounding yourself around strong design precedents, like whether that's studying past design movements, learning about a renowned designer, or just looking at examples of like actual good design. Um, I think it means that like you should be changing the way you look at things around you and be a bit more critical about it, like the different apps you use, asking yourself like why this specific app is designed the way it is. Like one thing I used to do to improve and just like practice was I like screenshot like an app or something and then try to trace it down to the pixel like one to one, um, while asking myself like why is this thing spaced 4 pixels apart from this thing, why is this thing 8, why is this thing 12, or like why this button looks the way it does compared to the other button. A lot of people will tell you that you don't have to be pixel perfect, but I'd argue that it's something you should be aiming for, like at least towards end of the design process or whatever project you're working on. Other resources that really helped me was just like reading through design guidelines and looking at things like Google's material design, Apple's human interface guidelines, Shopify's Polaris, and whatnot. So you can get an idea of like what the industry standard like literally looks like and functions like. And I think this all leads to the question of like imposter syndrome, like which I get, it sucks. But I think more people need to understand that imposter syndrome is something that will never go away. Like no matter where you are in your career, whether you're just starting out or whether you're like principal designer at a company, the fact is that there just will be someone stronger than you. And so to some extent, you kind of need to, you kind of do need to always compare yourself to other people that are stronger than you. So you have a concrete vision and a picture of like where you need to be and what you need to do to get there. Better yet, I think, you should be able to find opportunities to seek feedback from these people, right? Like people you trust will give you honest, constructive feedback. But and try to be specific with the feedback you want in that sense. And in my opinion, like try to stay away from this idea of like toxic positivity. Like I see a lot where juniors are giving other juniors feedback and they're commenting on like, I really like your button on your homepage. Like what's that going to do to help you improve? You know what I mean? So yeah. Um, so in my opinion, if you're to take anything from what I just said, I'd say it should be categorized into these 3 things. One, your portfolio is absolutely essential because it is a direct representation of you, your skills as a designer. And it's pretty straightforward how that lets hiring managers know that, like, whether they can trust you to do the job or not. Number two, you should try to get try your best to get really good at visual design. Like, it's the clearest way to show your literal design skills. And frankly, a good chunk of juniors aren't great at this or understand the importance of it. Um, it's not an easy skill to learn, and frankly, there is no trick to it. Like, you just have to practice over and over again, which brings me to the last point. Like, really, it takes reps and a lot of time. You need to be able to make a lot of things, seek feedback often to improve, and then, repeat over and over again until, you get your work to a certain standard, and then you're essentially like actually job ready. So that's it from me. Thank you all for listening. And feel free to drop any questions in the Discord channel or at the panel later today, or I guess since we have a bit of time now, we can take some live questions.
Thank you for that super insightful talk. And as a person with very limited knowledge about designing, I definitely learned a lot today and about UX and how to get into the industry. Now we'll move on to any questions the audience may have. And due to some time constraints, if there's any more questions come out to the design panel from 3:30 to 4:30, and Perry will be able to answer them too. One question for you. What are the key skills that you believe every junior UX designer should invest time in learning?
Visual design, always visual design. Like, it's important to learn all other things, of course. Like, don't skip past whatever theories they're teaching in school. I never went to like a traditional like human-centered interaction program or anything, but in my opinion, on your free time, you should always be practicing. And the one thing you want to get really good at is visual design. Like, if you're able to present like a really nice set of mockups for your problem, like that is the piece of motivation that usually is like, oh, I'm a hiring manager. This person clearly knows how to design. I'll take the time and read through your project. So yeah, visual design always.
That sounds good. Rowan asks, your portfolio is epic, by the way. Do you recommend junior UXers to develop their own websites?
Yeah, good question. And thank you, by the way. In my opinion, like, do what you need to do to get your work up. Know that your portfolio is always going to be a work in progress. You just have to get it to like a quote unquote good enough state to start applying the jobs. So, even if your portfolio looks the way it does now, just know that in like a couple of months or like next year, it should look very different because you should be naturally improving as a designer. Um, Whether or not to develop your own website, that's up to the bandwidth that you have. Like, for me, like when I got laid off at Google, I had nothing to do, right? Like, I went to Japan, I was chilling out, um, and like I was literally just spending my days working on a portfolio. So I had all the time in the world. So I invested a lot in like, building it from scratch in Figma first and then putting it over to Webflow. And that just took a lot of time that I otherwise wouldn't have had if I was in like school or something. But do what you need to do to get it up. But you should know that like the more effort you put into it, it will inevitably pay off.
Thank you. Kian asks, what is your favorite part about UI UX design, and what are some of the biggest challenges you face as a product designer?
Yeah, really good question. Favorite part for me is being able to build features that a lot of people use. So working at Discord's super awesome. Like, I'm building features that are very consumer facing, very fun, very shiny. Biggest challenge there is figuring out a way to make my work make money. So I'm just not concerned. I'm not only concerned about like, design aspect of things, like, like how this button looks, whatever the information architecture looks like, blah, blah, blah. But I also need to figure out how to, you know, present my work to leadership and executives on like why this feature will make money. So that is definitely a challenge for me, and is something that I work very closely with product partners alongside to solve. So as a product designer, that's definitely a huge challenge trying to advocate for yourself, but also consider the fact that like, design is one thing, but like businesses need to make money, and you got to be that person to help the company make money.
Next, Maria asks, as a junior designer, are startups a better way to gain experience, or is it better to first learn through more established organizations?
Yeah, really good question here. My personal opinion is if you can find a job at an established organization, that is always better because you're able to learn from people who've been doing it for years. When I was at RBC, I had the amazing opportunity of like chatting with actual professionals and senior designers and like executives, design executives who've been doing this for countless of years, and just like ask them how things work. At Google, I was able to work with senior designers and like the industry best and like kind of pick their brains for work. So same thing for Discord too. Like I'm around such a talented pool of designers that I have so much to learn from. So in my personal opinion, that's what you should do. But like startups can be helpful too. Like I think that's something you need to decide for yourself whether you want like complete autonomy to be the person defining everything, or maybe you know you don't want to do that just yet. You just want to like stay young, stay lean, and start learning. Um, so in my opinion, like learn first, and then maybe later on, once you get those experiences under your belt, like be that person to like be the 0 to 1 designer at a startup or something. But I know junior designers who are really, really thrive in that startup environment because they have that freedom. Whereas others, they prefer to learn first and then kind of see that fun kind of, I don't know what to do next startup vibe later on.
Thank you. And next, how would junior designers catch up to those who have a 4-year professional background in design?
That's a really good question. I found myself trying to do the same thing as an architecture major, trying to break into this new industry I didn't even know. What I did was try to find out who the top talent was. I would literally like go on LinkedIn, see people were doing these like 4-year degrees in like human centered interaction or like actual digital design focused things, and then I would just look at their work and like first of all, like be in awe of the quality of it. But at another side of my brain, I'm just like, what can I do to get to this level? And so that is kind of what I tried to do. It is obviously going to be a grind because you are quote unquote technically behind since they have 4 years and you have however many less years. Myself being an architecture student, though, I felt like it did help me give me a boost because it was still like a design background. So I felt like a lot of the principles carried over very well. And especially like, understanding what good critique looks like and like how to sit down, let's like grind through a bunch of designs. Uh, that definitely helped. So in my opinion, like throw out imposter syndrome, accept that it's always going to be there. Look at what the top talent looks like, and then frame for yourself what you need to do to get there.
That's a real good advice. Next, Miriam asks, how can we keep ourselves updated? Which resources do you recommend?
I'm gonna assume updated as like keeping updated with like the current trends and everything. In my opinion, just like try to keep track of what the top companies are doing. I like to refer to design agency work a lot. Like for example, Work and Co, Instrument, whatever out there, just to see what crazy stuff they're working on, just so I can get a sense of like what the absolute top pool of designers in this industry are working on, so I can see how that might influence other product designs work across other companies.
Helen asks, any advice for new graduates who are applying for UI UX positions with no prior internships, co-op in UI UX as a student?
It's a good question. I think internships definitely help. Like no doubt. If you have an internship at like Google and you're applying for a full time role, that helps you stand out for sure. But I think design, we're lucky to have a portfolio as an artifact, and that our resume isn't like 100% the only thing that helps companies make a decision. So get your portfolio to a really good state, and then that should help you push through. Past like the resume points that you might not have.
Next question is, do you believe that UX UI industry as a whole is currently oversaturated? I've heard it be said once.
I don't think it's oversaturated. Good talent is still hard to find. Like there's a lot of people trying to break in, but that just means it's more opportunity for you to stand out. So that's the perspective I've always looked at it. Like, you know, there's an impression that like this industry is easy to get in, but like the fact that it isn't. So I would say like at a bigger pool, the amount of unqualified candidates is pretty saturated, but the amount of qualified candidates is not at all. And if you're able to get to the qualified state, I think you shouldn't have little problem finding a new role.
I think I skipped over this question, but Zubair asks, I build my portfolio on Notion. What do you think as a senior designer?
First of all, I'm not a senior designer, so that's that. But Notion's fine. Like in my opinion, I would not use it because I don't have full control over it. But if you have strong project work in there, like Notion's completely fine. I would just be careful about like the permissions. Like I open Notion portfolios all the time, and then like it's locked behind something, or like it's making me sign into Notion, and that's just annoying. So that's that. But at the end of the day, like make sure your projects are really good inside of it, and it doesn't really matter like what platform you're using to build your website.
Anna asks, what does your idea career trajectory look like? Where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully not get laid off again. So that'd be cool. But I'm just trying to focus on doing good work right now. I'm not looking to get senior yet since I don't even think I have 2 years of experience, like 1.5 maybe. So just we're focusing on making really good stuff and then worrying about everything later on and just trying to enjoy my 20s. Cool.
Thank you. And if that's all the questions we had, I would like to say thank you to Perry again for the presentation and for answering all of these questions. It was very wonderful having you here. And that's all about it for today.
Cool. Thank you all.